Right, welcome everyone back to the Athlete Climate Academy. I've got a wonderful guest today. We've got Tom Carroll, who's a science content creator and genuinely one of my favorite content creators on the YouTube channel as it pertains to science, and in general as well, of all of YouTube. Hi Tom, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we start?
Sure, yeah. I've been making content on YouTube and across different platforms like Instagram and TikTok for a few years now. Generally spanning basically whatever takes my interest on a weekly basis. So the topics can, range from super nerdy stuff to maybe some stuff that's just completely in the public consciousness that week. And then more recently, I've kind of been looking a lot more towards climate change, biodiversity loss and all of that good stuff, and kind of trying to look for a little bit of optimism in there, looking towards the future. And that's basically what my content is gearing towards right now.
What's some of the recent ones in the last year or so that you've done on climate and on biodiversity? Any good topics?
Yeah, I'd say one of my favorite ones is about floating wind farms, which is a topic that usually when I say floating wind farms, people say, aren't all those wind farms out there floating? Which is why I love it, because it's a completely new technology that could be a complete game changer in the future, and people don't really know how much of a game changer it is. So I love talking about that. And I also really love just talking about stuff to do with reforestation and saving trees, and just simple ideas like that maybe just change how people talk about stuff in a little way. They're usually my favorite ones to make. And on top of that, just talking about random tech that maybe is going to make a difference in the future. Always fun for me.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy watching those kind of videos on your YouTube channel, because it's stuff that you might not. It's stuff that's obvious, but it's not obvious until you're told it, if that makes sense. Like those kind of changes that we can make, those kind of technologies that we can implement are going to be, like I say, a floating wind farm isn't something that you would initially go, that's what we need, but could be exactly what we need, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love the ideas that make people go, oh, right, okay. Now I can see why this dork on YouTube is even talking about that thing. But first you got to get them to click. So hopefully they sound interesting on their own. But definitely love just making people go, I get it. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the aim with your videos then and content creation on YouTube and on the internet in general, what is your aim with it? Like, is it to educate people? Is it to persuade people in one direction or another? Especially when it comes to climate change and biodiversity loss, reforestation, etc. Is it literally like, I want to educate you on this topic, and then you do your own thing with it afterwards? Or is it, I'm going to try and persuade you one way or the other, if it's good or bad?
Honestly, it's a little less selfless than that. It's way more heavily driven towards me just wanting to tell people about this cool thing that I read about or something like that. And hopefully, instead of trying to persuade anybody or starting any arguments about anything, hopefully the small bits of information that I make within what I aim to be an entertaining piece of content for those 5 or 10 minutes, hopefully there'll be little nuggets of information that maybe will add up on top of people's views, or add up enough to maybe tweak people's views. But I don't really start it thinking, right, I need to change people's views right now, because I think when you do start from that angle, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail, because you've already taken a heavy stance that's just going to come across in your content and maybe isn't going to go down well in somebody that maybe needs to be persuaded in another way. If that all makes sense.
The climate change space, I've actually been doing it for a long time now, since I got into into science communication in general. Like, I was part of a British Council climate change group back in 2007, I think. That our job in Wales was to like think about how we go about changing people's attitudes towards climate change, and how we go about pushing the conversation forward and whatnot. Obviously, we didn't do that great a job because we're still talking about it 14, 15 years on. But there is a certain amount of over the last decade of us having to try and persuade people, to re-educate them, to give them the information that they need. And with climate deniers, are we saying that climate denialism is a thing that we have to just put up with? It's a thing that you're not going to change people's minds? Or through content, can we then change people's minds on that?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is that when it comes to climate deniers, you've basically got two different types of climate deniers. You've got the people that maybe haven't seen the right information or haven't seen any information about it, and so they're not really making an informed decision on any of it, and they're just basically denying from a place of basically just not knowing, or ignorance, which is kind of a loaded word, but and then the other camp is people that have read the information and have seen, documentaries, have read articles and stuff about all of this, and they still choose to deny what is clearly in front of us. And I look at those people as thinking, well, they've clearly got something else, some other agenda on their mind right now. And there's nothing I can do that is going to convince them to change their mind. So it's really that first type of person that I'm focused on whenever I do think, oh, this video I'm making could have an impact on someone. It's either the people that are, sitting on the fence, or maybe they're, sitting just next to the fence on either side of it and just need that extra little push to, either bring them over to the side of not denying it, or bringing them further into maybe towards taking action, stuff like that. So I do think that content has a real place in persuading certain people, but I do think there are certain deniers that are just they're going to be here the whole time, and we're just going to have to accept that and just focus on the people that maybe we can influence and maybe have a chance of actually taking action that we need to be taken. That's my point of view on all of that, to be honest.
I think that we've arrived at a place now where we've gone past that conversation of, is climate change real? The scientists have done their jobs. The scientists have shown that climate change and global warming is a human-caused problem that we need to tackle. So it's on science communicators and presenters and the general public to talk more about this, and for us to talk about the problems that we're going to face. Like, we've already started seeing multitudes of problems, and the people watching this, professional athletes that are out in the field, out in the mountains, running on glaciers, all that kind of stuff, skiing. We're seeing the ski season shift. We're seeing the mountaineering season shift from place to place, because it's warmer now in times where we expect it to be colder, so you have to go at different months. So we're already seeing these effects. So I feel like we're starting to shift what our content is going to be to, how can we deal with this? How can we mitigate the problems that we face by bringing in things like floating wind farms? But also, what are the changes that we're going to see as well? So that kind of content needs to be out there more. But there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of content already out there. For people who want to create more content, what would you say? Like, is there already enough out there in just talking about climate change, or is there still space for more?
I say I agree with you that there is a lot out there on every single platform talking about this stuff. And if you're somebody that actively goes and seeks this stuff out, then you're probably already going to know about how many people there are doing content on all these things. And there's a lot of videos that are repeated across these channels, and specifically talking about YouTube, where people will do the same topic and basically make the same video. So it might look like there's an oversaturation, but I think you make a really important point that there's a conversation shift towards actually explaining these big scary effects, like to maybe a finer detail than has been explored in the past. I don't think people, for instance, understand what mass migration might look like in the future due to climate change. Topics like that, I think, need to be explored more. But also, every time I think there are enough people, I'll stumble across another person, and they'll be doing it in their own way, in a really unique way that maybe is getting a message across to a new audience or the same audience in a different way, or is maybe reaching a larger audience. As well as the idea of maybe people that aren't in the science communication genre, them talking about this stuff. That's a whole other can of worms where they could be reaching audiences that we have no chance of reaching. Imagine if a football podcast channel starts talking about this stuff on a weekly basis, as like a 5-minute segment talking about it at the beginning of their podcast or something. You're now reaching an potentially entirely new crowd that I'm not reaching. And then that's the same with any genre out there. So it's almost like I think there's room enough for more people to bring unique voices to the conversation. And I think there's a lot of room for the conversation to start spanning outside of the genres it's been in so far. Outside of the nerdy area of YouTube, outside of the nerdy area of Instagram, into the more sort of broad category where it's like, okay, this is just a worldwide topic. Everybody needs to learn about it. So let's just talk about it as a thing instead of this, idea that people can't grasp.
One of the reasons that we started the Athlete Climate Academy was because that is a whole bunch. I love the idea that I love the audiences that we don't normally get to. You watch science documentaries or science on YouTube or wherever, and that's a specific audience. But like I say, there's tons of audiences that don't talk about climate change on a regular basis, and it's going to affect all of them. It's going to affect everyone. So, one of the reasons we want professional athletes to have the confidence to talk about climate change more is because, like I say, that's an entire audience that looks up and has role models in the professional sports realm that are influenced by those people. And, if they're talking about it on a regular basis, if they're dropping it into talks, if they're dropping it into like post-race conversations, all that kind of stuff, then that's an entire audience that content creators that aren't in that field just can't get to.
I 100% agree. It's really exciting what you're doing here, and it's really exciting just to think about if this can become a topic where people really understand that this is going to affect everyone, and if the way that the people start to understand that is just through everybody talking about it, then I think that's kind of a great thing. So it's really exciting to think about, definitely.
So what's the next steps for content creators, whether they are, professional athletes creating content on these channels, whether it's regular people creating content on these channels who want to try and make a difference? What are the kind of top tips? What should we be doing in terms of, what are you going to be doing over the next year or two to try and have that conversation with your audience? And then we maybe extrapolate from that out to what other people can be doing too. So what are you going to be doing to have this conversation about our changing climate, our changing planet, biodiversity loss? Let us into your secrets.
All right. Well, my thinking is that I want to bring a little bit of optimism to the conversation. Not blind optimism that's going to cover up the reality of the situation, but optimism that can get people either stoked about the idea of a better future or stoked because they know there are things that we can do to counteract all these really scary things that everybody's talking about is going to happen. So from the perspective of my content, I'm looking to try and find stories and information specifically about teams, organizations, people that are doing things, taking action, and what this action might evolve into in the future. And I honestly think that that's something a lot more people should probably start doing, is showing people that action can be taken, not just at the level of beach cleanups and things like that, which are great, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not going to be the things that make the difference. I'd love to see a lot more focus on pushing people to take action and pushing the idea that you don't know who is in your audience right now, who you're talking to. You just need one of those people to be in a position where they can make a difference in a specific industry or a specific part of the world. You just need one person, and what you say can actually have a real world effect on all these things we're talking about. So I think the education is great and it's important, but it's already out there. A lot of the stuff is already out there, and there's a lot of people you're not going to convince in the future if you can't convince them with what's already out there. So, keep on educating, but drive the focus towards actually being able to have a difference on what's happening, and do that through optimism. Take away a bit of the doom and gloom that makes people's eyes glaze over and their brains shut off, and actually get people interested in this stuff, because it's exciting as well. It's terrifying, but at the same time it's one of the most exciting things, because it can just lead to a ridiculous amount of innovation and a completely different world. Just to go off on a tangent, it's the idea that even if climate change wasn't a threat, there's a better world we can live in, and taking the same steps to combat climate change will lead to that better world. So it's a win-win all round. And I'd like to kind of spread all those messages, and I think a lot more people should as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've never faced, as humankind, a threat this big, but at the same time, we've never been in a better position to come up with the technology that we need to overcome it. So, some of the stuff that I see out there with carbon capture, with energy generation, all the rest of it, it is genuinely hopeful. So in that, what should we be... You mentioned a lot of... when you talk about this kind of stuff, you don't know who your audience is. One person could change everything. For the people watching this, a lot of time, they're going to have direct links to people in the outdoor industry, they can be sponsored by big outdoor companies. Let me throw something at you that we haven't talked about before. If you were a content creator or you run the YouTube channel or whatever for big outdoor brands, for brands that, or people like Red Bull and whoever else, what kind of content would you be creating for them? Would it be this hopeful? I imagine it would be this hopeful, upbeat content that educates people in a really kind of upbeat and significant way.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if I'm understanding your question right, what I would want brands like that to do is I would want them to want to be transparent to the point where they're actually finding out we actually need to clean up our act on this or that, instead of just greenwashing stuff and making people think they're doing a great job or something. I'd like brands to be more transparent, and I'd like them to just use what power they do have in the best way possible. For instance, you can look at Extreme E, which is a brand new concept, which is taking the idea of electric car racing to a whole different level, where they're actually only racing in areas that have already been damaged by human activity, and their aim is to leave any area that they race in a better shape than when they turned up. and they've got this big boat that has hydrogen fuel cells that's going to be charging the cars so they don't pollute any of these areas, from the cars themselves. And they've got a science lab on board as well, where they're going to be doing science and they're going to be setting up programs for the longevity of these places to improve over time. And it's these really out there concepts that I want to see more brands doing, because they have so much power. They can do these crazy ideas that sounds on paper so dumb. You're going to be racing in a deforested area. You're going to be racing like where there used to be glaciers. Who's going to watch that? This guy. I'm going to watch that. You're going to get your original audience, a new audience, and you're doing good as well. So I'm not too sure if I answered your question there, but I just want to see more people doing more stuff instead of just talking about it.
Yeah, I think that having that transparency is absolutely key when it comes to content creation from big outdoor brands and big sports brands and whatever else, because I feel like there's a big push at the moment for people not to point fingers at each other. Like, I'm working with a couple of outdoor brands at the moment where the project that we're working on is definitely like them admitting, okay, we pollute the environment. But it's also them saying that we're going to invest in coming up with solutions so that we can still do the things that people love, but at the same time, we're going to try and mitigate the impact on the environment. Can we even switch that around and like you say, like have trail running events that before and after we do big cleanups and like plant trees and like do all this kind of stuff, that they can be positive impacts as well as having the fun that we've always had. And I feel like that's a really cool place to end it, where that optimism you keep talking about always just comes through. So be passionate, create good content, but be optimistic, I suppose.
That is the exact message I would want to leave anyone with, is learn about stuff, learn the hard stuff. Oh yeah, I am. Can you see me? Saying that is the message I want to leave people with, is to learn as much as you can about stuff, and even if it's depressing, get through that, find the optimism, and just try and take action.
For sure. Tom Carroll, thank you so much for taking part and sitting with us for the last 20 minutes. Let's collaborate on something soon.
Thanks for having me, and definitely cheers to you.